You're 3 years into your career at one of those Manhattan law firms that looks exactly how you'd imagine. Glass walls, fresh coffee that never runs out, conversations where everyone measures every single word. You build 2,000 hours a year. You draft contracts. You review mergers. You sit in rooms full of people who all believe they're the smartest person there. You're good at it, sure, but you're also one of 47 associates on your floor, and not one of you matters yet. You know it, they know it. Then David Alcott walks to your desk on a Thursday night in November, 9 p.m. He tells you to grab your coat. Doesn't say where, doesn't say why. In the elevator, he gives you one sentence. A client's son has a problem. The problem is in a hotel room on the Upper East Side. When you get there, here's what you find. A 22-year-old heir to a pharmaceutical fortune sitting on the edge of a bathtub, shaking. A young woman unconscious on the bathroom floor, drugs on the counter. The kid looks at you with absolutely nothing behind his eyes. No plan, no instinct, just panic and privilege. Alcott turns to you, doesn't even lower his voice, and says the family is worth $11 billion, and this woman cannot go to a hospital, can't talk to press, can't become a lawsuit. He asks if you understand. You say yes. You don't fully understand, not really, but you've already learned that hesitation at this firm is basically a career death sentence. Over the next 4 hours, you do things no law school prepared you for. You call a private physician whose number Alcott rattles off from memory. You clean surfaces. You arrange a car. You talk to the hotel's general manager, who already knows Alcott by name, which tells you everything. And you watch money move in a way that won't show up anywhere. The woman wakes up eventually. She's confused and scared and disoriented. You sit with her while the physician checks her vitals, and you tell her she had too much to drink. You tell her she's safe, that everything's fine. You lie. And the terrifying part, you're incredible at it. Your voice doesn't shake, your hands don't move. You just deliver the lie like it's room service. By morning, there's nothing. No evidence anything happened. The heir's on a private jet to some rehab facility in Switzerland. The woman's in a luxury suite at a different hotel with 50 grand in a new bank account and an NDA she signed while still half out of it. Alcott calls you the next afternoon, says the family's grateful, says there's a bonus coming. Then he says the thing that basically rewires your entire future. He says you handled that like someone who's done it before, and he wants to know if you'd like to do it again. So you do it again, and again, and again. Within 6 months, Alcott's pulled you completely out of the associate pool. No more mergers, no more conference rooms. Your work doesn't have paper trails or case numbers or a filing system. You exist in the negative space of the legal profession, that gap between what the law says you can't do and what wealthy people need done anyway. Alcott teaches you how it all works. A fixer isn't really a lawyer. A fixer erases problems. And billionaires, they don't commit crimes the way normal people do. They don't rob banks. They destroy harassment evidence. They bury environmental reports that'd tank their stock. They make inconvenient people vanish from the narrative. Not from the earth, from the story, from the version of events that the public will ever access. Your job? Manage reality itself. Here's what you learn fast. The most important skill isn't legal knowledge, it's who you know. Within a year, you've built a contacts list that would make a federal prosecutor physically ill. Private investigators who can dig up anything, journalists who'll kill a story for the right number, and other journalists who'll run a distraction piece for a higher one, forensic accountants who can restructure payments so illegal money looks like consulting fees, a retired FBI agent who still sells access to databases he definitely shouldn't be able to reach anymore. Every name is a tool. Every tool has a price, and you never forget what anything costs, because cost is the only language your clients actually speak. 3 years in, and Alcott retires, hands you his client list like a general surrendering command. 9 names, combined net worth north of $90 billion. You're 31. You leave the firm quietly, set up a private consultancy, no website, no signage on the door, no listed phone number. Clients reach you through one encrypted line. Your retainer is $2 million a year per client. For that, you get them around the clock every day for whatever needs to disappear. Your first major solo job almost destroys you. A tech founder worth $14 billion has a situation. His company's autonomous vehicle prototype hit and killed a pedestrian during a road test on a course that was supposed to be closed. Supposed to be. There's dashcam footage, there's a body, there's a police department in some small California town that has absolutely no clue what it's sitting on. You fly out that night, meet the founder in a rented house 40 minutes from the scene. He isn't remorseful, he's doing math. Tells you the IPO is 7 weeks out, and, his exact words, "This cannot exist." You feel something happen inside you right then, like a wall going up. One side knows a person is dead, the other side is already solving the problem. You work 72 hours without stopping. You hire a local attorney to quietly rep the company in a worthless death settlement. You negotiate directly with the family, $8 million, airtight confidentiality. They're grieving, overwhelmed, and they take it because you present it as compassion. It isn't compassion, it's containment. You arrange for the dashcam server to have a catastrophic failure. You prep a counter-narrative with the comms team just in case anything leaks. Nothing leaks. The IPO goes forward. Stock opens at $312 a share. The founder makes $6 billion in one morning. He sends you a bottle of wine that cost more than your first car. You drink it alone in your apartment and don't sleep for 2 days. By year 5, you've basically mapped every species of billionaire crime. There are the personal disasters, affairs, assaults, addictions, the kids who break things in people with the confidence of someone who's literally never faced a consequence in their life. Then there's the financial architecture, shells within shells, offshore accounts, insider trades dressed up as coincidence, tax structures so aggressive they're functionally illegal, but so tangled that no regulator has the bandwidth to untangle them. Then the big ones, the structural crimes, the ones that don't even look like crimes. A factory poisoning a water table, a pharma company burying trial data that shows their drug causes cardiac arrest in 6% of patients, a mining operation displacing 12,000 people and calling it economic development. Those pay the most, because those are where the exposure isn't embarrassment, it's prison. You handle all of it. You become the person billionaires call at 2 a.m. when the thing they built starts cracking under the weight of what they did to build it. You're not their lawyer. You're not their friend. You're the membrane between their actions and any consequences whatsoever, and you charge like it. The moral architecture of your life turns into series of locked rooms. You don't think about the woman in that hotel room. Don't think about the pedestrian in California. Don't think about the 400 factory workers in Southeast Asia who got respiratory disease because you helped bury an air quality report. You think about systems, leverage points, the difference between a problem you can settle and a problem you have to dismantle entirely. You tell yourself someone else would do it if you didn't, someone sloppier, less careful, someone who might actually get people hurt through incompetence. You know that's garbage. You tell yourself anyway, because the alternative is sitting with what you've actually become, and you can't afford that, not financially, emotionally. The second you stop, the second you let the full weight of it hit you, you won't function anymore. And in your world, people who stop functioning don't retire, they get retired. Year 8. A client turns on you. Hedge fund manager, $6 billion net worth, SEC investigation closing in. He decides the quickest way to save himself is to hand them something bigger. He hands you. You don't learn this from him. Don't learn it from the SEC either. You learn it from a contact inside the DOJ who owes you a favor from 3 years ago, involving a senator's son and a dead escort in Miami. You've got maybe 48 hours before a subpoena hits. You don't panic. You planned for this. You've always planned for this. You activate a digital dead man switch, encrypted files set to distribute automatically to 14 journalists, 6 attorneys, and 2 foreign intelligence services if you're arrested, killed, or unreachable for 72 hours. Then you call the hedge fund manager directly. You describe what you have on him, in detail. Enough detail that he knows you're not bluffing. You keep your voice completely flat, professional. You don't threaten, you inform. There's a difference, and he understands it. He calls the SEC the next morning, withdraws his cooperation, cites mental health concerns. Investigation stalls. You cut him off immediately. His name goes on a different list now. People you'll never help again, but won't stop watching. You're 41. You carry the secrets of 11 clients, combined net worth past $140 billion. You've got people working for you in 9 countries. You've pushed through settlements totaling over $600 million. You've destroyed evidence in at least 4 cases that would have ended in convictions. You have never been charged, never been named in any filing. You don't exist in any of the stories you've shaped, and that's the whole point. That is the product. You sell absence. You sell the version of events where the powerful stay powerful, and nobody ever finds out what that actually costs. Your own life mirrors your clients' ones in weird ways. You're rich, but you can't explain why. You own property through shells, travel under names that are technically legal but deliberately misleading, haven't talked to your family in 4 years because being close to you is a vulnerability you can't control. You had one once, a woman who worked in publishing, kind, funny, completely oblivious to what you actually did for a living. You ended it the day a client asked you to run a background check on her as a precaution, and you realize that anyone near you becomes a data point, a pressure point, something that can be used against you. Now you're sitting in a car outside a hospital in Geneva. Inside, a mining billionaire is dying. Pancreatic cancer. 3 weeks, maybe 4. His estate, $22 billion, is built on illegal land seizures, bribes to 14 government officials across 3 countries, and at least one incident that'd make a war crimes tribunal very interested. His kids are already tearing each other apart over the inheritance, the board's jockeying, 3 law firms are circling like sharks. And his widow just called you, because she knows that when he dies, the protection dies with him. Everything he buried starts coming up. She wants you to make it permanent. Seal it all off so no investigation, no journalist, no government, no bitter heir with a grudge can ever dig it up. You sit there, you look at that hospital, and you think about what's in those files. The villages, the displacements, people who got swallowed by legal systems designed to crush them. You think about the fact that you could just walk away, let the whole structure collapse, let the truth do what truth does. Then you think about what that means for you, the switch, the people who'd come, the life you've built that's really just a cage made out of other people's secrets. You pick up the phone, call her back. You say yes. Because you always say yes, because that's what a fixer does, because the machine doesn't stop, and you are the machine now, and machines don't get to choose. You step out of the car, walk toward the hospital entrance, and every decision you've ever made walks right alongside you. You carry it all because nobody else can, and because nobody else ever will.